Today we've got a short but hopefully very helpful video, a video that I hope will save a lot of people a lot of time, specifically a lot of time digging through forums and hopefully prevent a lot of people from asking on their Toyota Sequoia Facebook group, will 33s fit with no lift or something along those lines. We're gonna hopefully save you the trouble of digging through that information and just tell you outright. I spent over 2 years working at a tire shop, so I've gotten a pretty good handle on what fits and what doesn't fit on these vehicles and what it takes to fit 33s. That's specifically what we're talking about today. We're gonna tell you what it takes to fit 33s. We're gonna talk about two different types of 33s, 285s and then 255s, because they're both a little bit different, but they both essentially fulfill the same purpose. 33-inch tall tires is, in my opinion, a really, really good kind of compromise between on-road and off-road performance. It's really, really great for overlanding purposes. So if your main priority is going out and exploring the backcountry and you want to improve your technical terrain capabilities of your vehicle just a little bit, 33s is a really, really great option to go with. So here we are with our first generation 2007 Toyota Sequoia. Although it's a 2007, this information is pretty much going to generally and broadly apply to all first generation Toyota Sequoias, so 2001 to 2007. And I'm going to tell you what it takes to fit 33s on it. Now, you've got two different sizes of 33-inch tall tires. You've got 285s and then 255s. I'm going to tell you how to fit 285s, because if you can fit 285s, the 255s are way, way easier. So 285s, this is going to be the tire size 285 75 16 and 285 70 17 and possibly 285 65 18 if you've got an 18-inch rim. But I think generally 16 and 17s are going to be a little bit more common. So you're increasing the tire diameter significantly, which means that you're going to, first of all, need to worry about potentially clearing the fender liners, but also you're going to need to worry about some of your suspension components, such as your upper control arm. Your upper control arm is going to be probably the most significant thing you're going to have to think about when you're moving up to a 285. From the factory, Toyota Sequoias generally have a wheel that have a 15 millimeter offset. Offset, in case you're not entirely aware, is basically a measurement of the distance between the center line of the wheel away from the hub or closer to the hub of the vehicle. So 15 millimeter wheel essentially means that the center line of the wheel is pulled 15 millimeters closer to the vehicle away from the hub. Whereas a negative 15 offset is going to be the opposite. It's going to be a wheel with the center line pushed 15 millimeters further away from the hub of the vehicle. Now, when you go up to 285, you're going to need a wheel, first of all, that pushes that tire away from the upper control arm. So you're going to need something with a lower offset number than 15. In my experience, generally, wheels with a 1 millimeter offset or less. Other common wheel offsets are 1 millimeter, 0 millimeters, -6 or -12. Those seem to be the most common offset numbers. All of those generally are going to work just fine. They're going to push that tire away from your upper control arm and also possibly your frame. I've heard of vehicles potentially coming into contact with the tire on the frame at times. This is going to help you out in that regard. So that lower offset number can be achieved with new wheels. That's what we ended up going with on our Sequoia. Although we don't have 285s, we could have gotten away with it either way. These wheels have a 1 millimeter offset, so that 14 millimeters further away from the hub of the vehicle with a 285 tire would push it away from that upper control arm, giving you the clearance that you need. The other way that you could achieve this is with wheel spacers. And if you do wheel spacers, you're probably going to need something about 1 inch in width. And I would suggest only getting a wheel spacer from a reputable brand. I wouldn't go cheap on those. Now let's talk about suspension height. So if you've got a wheel or a spacer that pushes that tire away from the frame and away from the upper control arm, you're also going to now need some additional suspension height in order to get the tire to clear your fender liners. Now, you might be able to squeeze those tires in without any suspension lift, and one thing that you can do is you can make some modifications to your fender liner. You could either cut it, or you could potentially take a heat gun, heat it up, and essentially push it further away. You can do stuff like that, but at the end of the day, with larger tires, you're almost always going to come into contact with that fender liner when the suspension articulates. So if you've got the wheel turned and you go over a bump, if you don't have any additional suspension height, that tire is likely going to come into contact with the fender liner. It's probably just going to be a minor bump. It might be a minor inconvenience. It might just make it a really annoying noise, but it could potentially do some damage depending on how hard it hits. So you definitely want to sort out your suspension in such a way to prevent that. Now, what I found in my experience is that on first-gen Toyota Sequoias, generally 1.75 inches is generally enough to get 33 inches to stop rubbing on your fender liner. Now, that can change depending on how much of an offset you have on your tire at the same time, so you might need to adjust accordingly. However, 2 to 2.5 inches is probably a really, really safe bet. However, with our 33s, we did Bilstein 5100 shocks on the third setting, which gives us 1.75 inches of additional lift, and that clears our 33s just fine. However, all tires are made differently. Even the same size tire from a different manufacturer can introduce some slightly different tolerances. So you'll have to play things by ear depending on what tire, wheel, and suspension lift options you go with. However, in my opinion, the safest bet for 285s is an offset of 0 millimeters and suspension height of at least 2 inches or more. That's probably the safest bet to get your stuff to clear. You still might have to trim the fender liner just a little bit. Now on to 255s. This is the tire size that we went with on our Sequoia, and we love the 255s. They're a little bit thinner, but you'd hardly know the difference unless you were looking at two tires side by side. That thinner width gives you some better MPGs, and it's actually an advantage off-road. If you don't believe me on that, I'm gonna link a video in the description from somebody very, very reputable and very experienced who will agree with me on that point. The other awesome thing about the 255s is that you don't have to worry about your offset. You can use your stock rim with 255 and not have any issues. Oh, and I should mention, this is 255 8017 and 255 8516. One thing to note about the 255s is that there's very, very few options from manufacturers in this size. However, we still found something from Toyo, a very good reputable brand with a good tire. With a 255, you don't have to worry about your offset so much. You just have to worry about the suspension height. So the same suspension height details I mentioned for the 285, they're also applicable to the 255. You need, at least 1.75 inches, preferably maybe a little bit more than that to ensure that the tire does not come into contact with the fender well. And once again, you still might need to make some slight adjustments. You might need to trim the fender liner just a tiny, tiny bit. All of that to say, the 255s are really easy to fit, and we really like them. Although if you like the look of a 285, that's totally up to you. That might be something that you prefer, and they're a great option as well. There's tons of options from all sorts of manufacturers in a 285, and they require just a little bit more planning to get them to fit. Well, I hope that answers a lot of questions, and I hope it saves you some time as you plan your own Toyota Sequoia Overland or off-road build. My name is Dylan, and we've got all sorts of Toyota Sequoia content on this channel. We've got trip videos, some install videos. We've got a lot of stuff already out on our channel and more stuff to come, so if you're interested in any of that, please subscribe, and thanks for watching.